In this video, we're going to introduce the basic forms of Greek second declension nouns. There are three declensions in Greek, the first, the second, and the third. We are starting with the second, and we'll move back to the first and go on to the third later on in our Greek journey. When we talk about a declension, we are talking about the pattern or grouping by which a Greek noun will change to indicate its number and its case. Remember, there are four basic Greek cases: the nominative, the genitive, the dative, and the accusative. And there are two Greek numbers, the singular and the plural. So because Greek is a highly inflected language, it's going to change its form to indicate what case and number it is. And it's going to change those forms based on its groupings, based on which declension it is in. So the second declension, the one that we are beginning with, is a group of nouns that ends either in omicron sigma, the last two letters, omicron sigma, in the nominative singular. So our example here is the word logos. These are usually masculine. These are masculine second declensions. The other sort of main subgroup of the second declension are nouns that end in omicron nu in the nominative singular, and these are usually neuter in their gender. So nouns that end in omicron sigma are second declension and usually masculine. Nouns that end in omicron nu are usually neuter and usually in the second declension. And you'll see when you look to a Greek dictionary or lexicon or to a vocabulary list that the noun gets listed this way. So logos with ha following it, this ha right here and this ta right here, it is what is called the definite article, who is going to be your very, very good friend in the future, is not your very good friend yet. We have not yet met this friend directly, or you've not been acquainted with or introduced to them in your Greek journey yet, but we will get there. But what this is indicating after the word itself is what gender the noun is. So this is what is, this is the masculine singular nominative of the definite article. Ha is the masculine singular nominative, whereas ta is the neuter singular nominative. So the, the gender of the definite article that follows the word in a vocabulary list is indicating what gender it is. You can also surmise that sort of based on the omicron sigma ending or the omicron nu ending, because most nouns that end in omicron sigma in the nominative singular are going to be masculine. This ha simply confirms that. And most nouns that end in omicron nu in the nominative singular are normally going to be neuter, and this ta confirms that. So if the us and the on are our signs to the nominative masculine, this is how a form is going to inflect for the nominative masculine or the nominative neuter. But for the other cases, it's going to inflect differently. For the genitive, the dative, the accusative, and the vocative, which we have not touched on at great length yet. The vocative is the case of direct address. And so it's a fifth Greek case, but it is far less common than the other four. The vocative is direct address when you want to directly address someone. Dr. Elder, are you teaching Greek? When you say Dr. Elder that way at the beginning of an English sentence, that would be the vocative in Greek, a direct address to a person. And very often the nominative and the vocative forms look exactly the same. So that's the case down here when it comes to the plural. So these are all the singular endings or forms for the masculine and the neuter respectively. So you see we have os, u, o, on, a for the singular, oi, on, ois, us for the plural. So these are all the different endings, the way that the end of a word will change to indicate what case it's in and to indicate what number it's in. So notice that there are a lot of similarities between the masculine and the neuter. But there are also a handful of differences. So the neuter nominative and accusative and vocative are always going to be the same. So we look over here, notice that these are all the same as one another, but they're different from what you see in the masculine. And then the other bit of information here is that these ones over here, dora, which is a neuter nominative plural, when this is the subject of a sentence, it can take a singular verb. So the gifts are good. The are in Greek there, the verb would be in the singular, even though you have multiple gifts. Because the neuter plural is a group of things, it takes a singular subject. So as we noted previously that most second declensions are masculine or neuter. Those ending in os are going to be masculine. Those ending in on are normally going to be neuter. There are some nouns that end in os in particular that are actually not masculine. So these are exceptions to that basic rule, and rather they are feminine. And that's what this definite article right here, hey, this is the feminine nominative singular definite article with which we will become more acquainted later on. But notice how this ending is os. So despite the fact that this is an os ending, this is not a masculine noun. It is actually a feminine noun. It's going to behoove you to memorize the endings of the second declension so that you can easily recognize what the case and number of a particular noun is. Because we don't depend on word order in Greek for meaning, you have to be able to quickly recognize case and number, and particularly case, to know how a Greek noun is functioning in a sentence. So it's going to behoove you to memorize these endings, and I've sort of taken away some of the more complicated stuff here, the endings as they appear on Greek nouns, to sort of boil it down to what we are looking at when we are looking at these second declension endings. And I want to introduce you to my very good friend who is going to help you memorize the endings of the second declension. So his name is Swain Ionessus. He looks like this. He looks like the most interesting man in the world. That's because he is the most interesting man in the world. And this is how you spell his name in English, Swain Ionessus. And this is how you spell his name in Greek, Swain Ionessus. And his name correlates to the endings of the second declension. So you see the sigma here going with the sigma here, the hoopsilon going with the hoopsilon, the iota, which is right under there. I could not get that into red. That wouldn't allow me to just select the iota and make it red, but pretend the iota subscript here is in red. That is a part of the ending. So in the dative, the iota is gonna, the dative singular, the iota is gonna like to go under the long omega. So that omega is sort of part of the dative ending with the iota. So the iota there goes with the iota in Swain's name. The nu here goes with the nu in his name. The epsilon of the rare vocative form goes with his name. So you sort of have to remember that the vocative is there for the singular, but it's combined. It uses the same form in the plural. And then again, another iota, but this time in the combination of omicron iota. And as we'll see for other forms, we're going to have other vowels in front of this iota. But notice that this iota is not subscripted. It's not going under the vowel. It's standing on its own as part of the line. So that can help you memorize or help you remember that this is plural because it's bigger than this iota, which is smaller and subscripted. But so this iota goes with Swain, the first letter of Swain's last name. The omicron nu here goes with the next two letters of his name, and we'll see that this omicron nu is very, very consistent for the genitive plural. As we expand this paradigm to include the first declension, it is also going to use omicron nu just as the neuter plural of the genitive does as well. And then the is these two letters of Swain's name, and the us here is these two letters of Swain's name. So Swain, ion is us, is our mnemonic device for remembering the endings of the second declension. So if you can remember Swain's name and get that written down into the paradigm, and then add those vowels that go to in the front of most of the letters, you'll be in very, very good shape. And then the next thing I want you to notice, so you memorize Swain ion es us as the mnemonic for the masculine endings of the second declension. And then from there, you just have to remember a couple of differences when it comes to the neuter. So notice how in the neuter, most of the forms are actually the same. So these ones are all the same. These ones are the same. Where there are differences are in the nominative plural, the accusative plural, the nominative plural, and then the vocative down here. And notice how also the nominative and the accusative in the neuter are exactly the same in both the singular and in the plural. So that's a helpful tip to remember. But just remembering that there are differences, particularly here, and here, but those differences sort of match up with one another in the neuter. So mnemonic, remembering Swain ion es us for the second declension, and then the slight differences when we move over from the masculine of Swain ion es us as our mnemonic to the neuter, we get those slight changes. So remembering Swain ion es us and being able to write his name down in that order, and then sort of fill in the blanks from there. So what I want to do here is give us some scaffolded practice using Swain ion es us as our mnemonic for the endings of the second declension. So I want you to go ahead and do is pause your video and use your whiteboard to write down the endings of the second declension in both the masculine and the neuter with Swain's name up there. So what you're going to want to do is fill these things in and see if you can't go back and put Swain's name in the right spots with the additions that are needed, as well as the slight changes that are made in the neuter. And when you unpause, I will have in here the correct answers for you. So it should look like this. Again, Swain ion es us with our iota subscript theoretically being in red as well. And the additions of the omicron to the sigma in the nominative and the genitive, and also the accusative, and also the nominative vocative of the plural, and the dative, and the accusative. You add those on there, and then you make those slight changes in the nominative and the accusative of the neuter so that you have on and on. Same thing in the vocative. And then and the alpha for the nominative and accusative plural in the neuter. All right, let's go ahead and go in for the high five before we get to some more practice. 1, 2, 3, high five, boom. All right, let's go ahead and do it one more time, but this time I have forgotten our friend's name. So you have to remember his name and go ahead and put it into the place that it goes with those additions. So a little bit harder this go around because you are doing 2 steps, remembering his name, putting it in there in Greek, and making those additions and changes. All right, so it is Swain ion es us. Once again, we put Swain ion es us over here with the addition of those omicrons in front of the mnemonic for his name, and then the changes that we need to make over here with respect to these letters in the neuter. And now we're going to do the hardest part of all. We're going to take our friend's picture away as well. And now I need you to just write down for me the endings of the second declension in both the masculine and in the neuter. When you come back, I'll give you the answers as well as the picture of our friend and his name. So here is Swain Ionessus, the letters of his name being associated with the masculine endings of the second declension, with those additions of the omicron and the changes that need to be made over in the neuter. And the last thing we're going to do here is some sample sentences together. It might behoove you to write out these words on your whiteboard and then mark them. Remember, I underline the verb, I put a box around the subject and a circle around the direct object and little squiggly brackets around the indirect object. If you don't want to go to the process of writing this all out, you don't necessarily have to. You can try and maybe pause and translate on your own here, identifying these different things that I ask you to do. This is sort of the order of operations that I suggest for a Greek sentence because word order is flexible in Greek. So you want to find the grammatical components of the sentence rather than necessarily just moving left to right. Generally speaking, you sort of want to move left to right, but you also want to be on the lookout for these things first and foremost. So given these helps over here, given our present active indicative endings, those primary active suffixes that we've talked about previously, and given the endings of the second declension with their different cases, remembering what the different cases do grammatically speaking, what their grammatical function is, see if you can translate all of this by taking these steps. And once you unpause, I'll go through it for us. All right, so the first thing we want to do is find our sentence. Find our verb in the sentence, which is lege, from lego. This a right here is from the third person singular of the present active indicative. So if we were parsing this verb, it would be present active indicative, third person singular. So we know it's a he, a she, an it, or a they, singular they, doing the action of this verb, which is speak. So speaks, he, she, it, they, speaks. But then we need to see if there is something more explicit about who that he, she, it, or they is. Is there an explicit subject in the nominative case in this sentence? So the nominative is going to be our subject of this sentence. So the nominative forms that we know so far end in os or on. So we're going to be looking for something in os or on that could be our subject. And we have two options, adelphos and logon. We know that this is going to be the subject because logos is a masculine verb, or a masculine noun, not a neuter noun. The form of it, the lexical form that you would find in a dictionary is logos, like that, with ha after it. So the lexical form or the dictionary form or the vocabulary list form is always going to be the nominative singular. So the nominative singular is logos with this ha after it indicating to us it's masculine. So we know that this form is actually going to be the accusative singular, right over here, though it looks the same as the neuter nominative singular and also the neuter accusative singular. But this one has to be, adelphos has to be our nominative singular ending in os because it cannot be anything else. So adelphos, word Philadelphia, brother. So a brother is the one doing the action of the verb. Speaks. So a brother speaks. And then what they speak is going to be the direct object that is in the accusative. In this case, it's going to be logon, which means word. So a brother speaks a word, and there's nothing sort of modifying, nothing in the genitive going after this logon to tell us more information about it. But there is this other word here, anthropo. And this po, this O with the iota subscript, is indicating to us the dative, the dative singular up here. So it's going to be the indirect object because the dative is the indirect object in a sentence. So it's the thing that receives the action secondarily. So a brother speaks a word to a person or a human. Let's go ahead and try another one. Once again, go ahead and pause the video here. See if you can't determine what this sentence is by first finding the verb, the subject, and then the object. So this one, despite being only 2 words in Greek, is going to be 3 words in English. So our verb is going to be, once again, be the very first word, pherusin, from Pharaoh, which means I bring. When we have that usin ending, that is going to be the third person plural. And I apologize, there's a mistake here. This should actually not, there should not be a nu there, because this word begins with a consonant and not a vowel. If this word begin with a vowel, then we would have that movable nu there to aid us in pronunciation. So pherusi dora, this is our present active indicative, third person plural. So they bring, and then dora. And we have to decide with this word, we look at its ending here. We have that ending, alpha ending. It can either be a nominative neuter plural, or it can be a nominative or an accusative neuter plural. If it's the nominative, it's the subject of the verb. It's the one doing the bringing. If it is the if it's the accusative, then it is the object, and we have a different subject that's implied in here. So we really have 2 options for this one, and I will always encourage you to make a decision between options. So it's either the they assumed over here as the subject of our sentence. They bring gifts. In this case, dora would be the accusative plural, the object of the verb. They bring gifts, a perfectly good translation, and this is probably the one it is. The other option that it could be is that dora could, technically speaking, be the subject. It could be the nominative plural subject of a plural verb. So gifts bring something, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You would want to have an object for what is brought in this particular sentence. So it makes more sense that they is implied in the ending of the verb, a different they than the gifts. And the dora is not, in fact, the subject of the sentence, but is the accusative neuter plural object of the sentence. They bring gifts. All right, one last one. Go ahead and one more time pause and see if you can make heads and tails of this sentence, finding the verb, finding the subject, finding the object. So our verb, once again, I've made things nice and easy for us here, is the first word in the sentence, luusin. So that usin ending, and notice the movable nu here with the vowel / diphthong that starts the next word. Usin is going to be our third person plural suffix for the present active indicative. So by means of parsing, we have a present active indicative, third person plural from the verb luo, which means I loose. In this case, because it's third person plural, it's they loose. And now we need to see if we have an explicit subject for this verb in the nominative. So we're looking for a nominative plural because we want the plural of our verb to match the plural of the noun. And we do, in fact, get that with hui oi. This oi at the end matches the nominative plural over here of the second declension. So this means sons in the plural. So sons loosen or release. And then we need to know what they release. What is the object in the accusative? And we get that with doulos. This us ending here is the accusative plural masculine ending of doulos, which is slave. So in this case, slaves. So sons release slaves. And then this apostolon, we got to figure out what to do with that. So we have this own ending, which is going to match up over here with the genitive plural. And remember, our go-to for the genitive is the English word of, very often showing possession or some kind of relationship. So in this case, slaves of apostles is what our whole phrase is here. So you can sort of think of these 2 words going together as the object. And very often how I normally mark the genitive is with blue squigglies, and the genitive is normally follows the word that it modifies or goes with. So to put it all together, we have sons as our subject, which in English we like to have in first position in the sentence. Sons release, going over to the verb, slaves of apostles. All right, let's go ahead and end with a high five. Way to go. Great work in this video. Keep it up. So proud of you. 1, 2, 3, boom.